Self-esteem, if I felt like the need to urinate, it would stop me from urinating in front of you. First of all, I'd like to say something about how the book came to have its title. Mirror, Mirror, it's called. Its original title, the title I wrote it under, was Because You're Worth It. And it was stimulated by that famous advertising slogan of L'Oréal, the very useful French firm which makes things that everybody needs. The way the advertising campaign stimulated the book was, it got me thinking, why do I hate that campaign slogan so much? Every time I saw it, and it was very common, certainly 8 or 9 years ago, I felt this sort of rising tide of visceral anger and frustration and hatred for the modern world. And of course I was getting old at the time, but still. And that puzzled me. I was puzzled by my own reactions. Why did I take against it with this kind of, as I say, sort of visceral horror? And so I started to think about that. And as I thought about it, I started to deal with the emotions of self-love. And I found the landscape was much more complicated than I'd ever imagined it to be. So if we think of some of the words which get thrown about, we might think of narcissism, conceit, vanity, pride, self-esteem. All of those are used, I think, largely interchangeably by many people. But in fact, I think they're differences. One difference I was alerted to by my friend Anthony Grayling. We were talking about his new College of the Humanities, now deceased, unfortunately. He knew Freddie Eyre. Freddie Eyre was one of his teachers. Freddie Eyre was a famous philosopher, for those of you who are very young, who appeared on the Brains Trust and things. And Freddie said to Anthony one day, "You know, Anthony, people say that I'm vain, and it's quite true, but I'm not conceited." And that's sort of paradoxical, isn't it? What's the contrast he'd got in mind? Well, I think one contrast, I'm not sure it's the one he had in mind, but a contrast I would make is something like this, that if you're conceited, you're on the way to narcissism. You're on the way to taking no notice of other people. That is, you sail through life self-sufficiently. You don't see the need to take advice from other people. You don't even see the need to debate your ideas with other people. You're, as it were, happy in your own skin or in your own brain. And that's an affliction, I think, because many people who are conceited, for that very reason, they're not conversable. They're not used to having their ideas challenged. They don't hear challenges. And Freddie wasn't like that, but Freddie was vain. Now, what does vain mean? Well, I think it comes in various flavors, but one thing that I think is characteristic of vanity is a greed. It's a greed for applause. You want the admiration of other people, and you want it too much. I think we all like the admiration of other people. You like it when people say, "Oh, well done, that was a jolly good show," so on and so on. You feel a little glow of pride. And a vain person doesn't really care whether he deserved the applause, as long as he gets the applause, or she. I use pronouns interchangeably. I'm very modern like that. As long as you get the applause, you feel you've won something. And of course, like any desire, it can get out of hand. It can turn into a lust for esteem from other people. seems to me characteristic of one form of vanity. Funnily enough, I think at the other end of the scale, there's a slightly different form of vanity, which approaches conceit. I've already said about conceit that it's a kind of indifference to the views of other people. And there is a kind of vanity which is probably illustrated by, as it were, the characteristic look of a model on a catwalk. If you think of the characteristic looks of models on catwalks, they don't smile at you, they don't take any notice of you. They sort of stride along, looking very, very pleased with themselves. And that's an exercise of vanity. And the interesting thing is that it's quite attractive. It sells clothes. So why do we find that attractive? Because in real life, it's not at all attractive. If somebody's got their nose stuck in the air and they take no notice of you, it's demeaning to you, which is unpleasant. It's a kind of little dig or insult to your own self-esteem, which is very unpleasant. So why is it usable to sell clothes? And in fact, why did L'Oreal's advertisement work so well? It sold perfumes and other tat. So why does just being told you're worth it have this sort of magnetic effect on people? So I began to think that there's mysteries here. Narcissism, I think, is the far end of conceit. In the Greek myth, Narcissus was solitary. He lived alone in the countryside where he tended to sheep. He was a shepherd boy. And his only sort of human contact, or semi-human contact, was the nymph Echo. And Narcissus heard the words of Echo. But of course, Echo does nothing but repeat the words he says. So in this case, Echo was repeating to Narcissus his own words. And that's quite, it's an insight into a certain aspect of our natures. It's easy and sometimes quite pleasant to rehearse in our mind's eye the words we imagine other people to be using about us. People obviously say of me that I'm, frightfully good lecturer, terribly intelligent, distinguished career, sells lots of books. At least if I tell myself that that's true, it's rather pleasant for a while. And words I don't use about myself include, well, you can all guess, fat, aged, ugly, past his prime. Pity we didn't hear him 30 years earlier. So in the myth, of course, Narcissus only hears Echo, and you imagine he only hears Echo saying nice things about him. And of course, he falls in love more directly, visually, because he sees his own image reflected in a pool of water. And this obsesses him so much that he fades away, dies, and leaves behind no body. Narcissus was always, as it were, incorporeal. He wasn't really a person amongst others. Because to be a person is to find yourself as a person amongst other persons. So there was something telling. Greek myths often have this amazing kick in them, the detail that somehow counts. And I think this detail of Narcissus, he turned into the flower, the daffodil, or the Narcissus tribe flowers. So that was the alternative for him. And I think the myth tells us that that kind of obsessive self-esteem or obsessive love of yourself, obsessive self-concern, is eventually killing. it not only kills you, but it leaves you, as it were, without effect on the rest of people, on the other people around you. So in a sense, it's self-nullifying, because you're in love with yourself, but your love of yourself prevents you being a person amongst other people, and it prevents you having any kind of real legacy. So here we've got narcissism, conceit, and vanity. Let me return to vanity, the two different poles. The pole when it's quite near to conceit, and the pole when it's far away from conceit, when it's a greed for the admiration of other people. As I say, that when it goes to being greed for the admiration of other people, it's something that we can all recognize. We all like it, as I said earlier, when people can be heard to be saying good things about us. That's nice. Or to applauding our performances. That's nice too. But it can be overdone, obviously. If it's under control, it probably amounts to self-esteem. And this is the penultimate aspect of people I'd like to talk about. Self-esteem has been described, it's described by Milton, as second only to faith, as a good thing, as a virtue. That's slightly surprising, because in the Christian tradition, anyhow, because pride is the worst of the 7 deadly sins. It's the fount from which all the others spring. So the Christian tradition is very down on pride, and you might think that pride and self-esteem are close cousins. But here's Milton, who's a very good Christian, telling us that self-esteem is noble. It's a good thing. And you can see again what he means. It's your self-esteem which is appealed to when the schoolmaster says, you've let me down, you've let the school down, but worst of all, you've let yourself down. And the poor chastened school pupil goes away feeling lousy about himself and vows to reform. They don't reform, but they vow to reform. And, so you've let yourself down. Self-esteem is the attitude towards the self which prevents you letting yourself down. It would stop me, for example, from, if I felt like the need to urinate, it would stop me from urinating in front of you. I feel I'd let myself down if I did that, as well as losing my audience. So self-esteem is, I think what Milton's getting at is that self-esteem is the aspect of your image of yourself which prevents you from letting yourself down, from becoming a laughing stock, or doing something so conspicuously silly or bad or unworthy that you're going to lose face, you're going to lose credibility in the eyes of other people. And put like that, self-esteem is necessary. It keeps us on the straight and narrow, or nearly on the straight and narrow, makes us like to appear to be on the straight and narrow. And that's at least halfway to being a good person.
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below. Or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.